Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and each week I share with you my journey of growing my own food in my allotment and my kitchen garden as I try to be a little bit more self-sufficient. I personally believe that we should all be growing some of our own food, and I hope that I will inspire and encourage others to do exactly the same. Now, coming up this week, I've got a bit of a bee update coming to you at the end of this podcast. I have also been sorting out my pots in the kitchen garden, but I start this week off down on the allotment with a bit of an allotment update. So come join me down on the allotment. Well, here we are, the end of July, the last weekend of July on the allotment, and everything is looking pretty autumnal actually. I do think we are heading into autumn now, so things are expected to change. But it hasn't helped this year that everything has been so incredibly dry, and I think that has caused an issue of just speeding things along, making it a little bit harder to cope. Now, when I say everything is looking a bit autumnal, I'm just looking at my main crop potatoes, and I'm starting to see the first signs that they are starting to show that they are going to be dying off. So, as I said, I think things are moving in the right direction. We've still got a few weeks before we need to harvest these potatoes, but they are showing signs that they are going to be ready fairly soon. I've of course harvested some more of our second early potatoes, the variety called Nicola, and not a great harvest once again, but certainly better than the first earlies. However, it does mean that we are getting harvests, and we're getting decent sized potatoes as well. I have to say, the potatoes are of a decent size, not the tiddly ones that are awkward to peel. They're decent size that me and my wife can certainly have a few meals out of each harvest. I'm only harvesting a few at a time at the moment, I've harvested basically one row this week and last week, and that has just given us enough to see us through, and that's going to be our continuation as we go on over the next few weeks. Now, I said that my first early potato bed, we have harvested all the potatoes out of that. I've gone over to make sure there was no potatoes left in there. What I've also done this week now is just planted in some kale plants. Now, kale is a fantastic winter crop in my opinion. I know not everybody likes kale, but I'm quite partial to it, and I have quite a few kale plants sitting at home, young plants that were sown earlier in the year, and they're going to need to go into the ground fairly soon, the hope being that they're going to grow big and strong and really get through the winter to give us some decent harvests of kale. Now, I've got those in the ground today. I've given them a good watering in to make sure they will be established, and that's going to continue throughout this week before we give them a final mulch. I've also got some cabbages that are going to go in here fairly soon as well. I just need to make sure that I feel the cabbages are going to be large enough and strong enough to support themselves going into the ground. This for me is always the difficult thing. We need to make sure our plants are big enough and strong enough when they go in to cope with basically the lack of water. When I have young plants growing at home, they're in pots and the roots are generally sat in water. So when we put them into the ground, and with a lack of water at the moment, I need to make sure that those roots are strong enough that they're going to find water and they're going to continue to grow and find water. Watering after planting does really help them out in a big way, so that really has made quite a difference. It's the same with the leeks that we planted out last week. I checked on those today and they have established quite nicely. I was worried that with it being so dry they would struggle, but I think because we gave them so much water last week we haven't lost any of them. They're still quite young, they're still quite small, so fingers crossed that they will grow on, and I'll keep an eye on those over the coming weeks. But that bed is completely full of leeks, which is a good sign. And to me, this is just showing that all the beds that we have are being used up, and the fact that when we harvest stuff, more crops go in to follow on is also a good sign. To me, it just proves that there is plenty of scope for successional sowing and for making sure we make the most use of the land that we have. Now, in that vein, I've also gone around my allotment and I've been identifying areas that I think need a lot of attention. I've mentioned in previous weeks about my gooseberry/bramble area and what I'm going to do with that. And that's, of course, one of those on the list. But I've followed this up with my raspberry bed area, my leaf mould area, and the very top of my allotment, which borders my neighbours. Now, what I've realised is that these are all on the edges. I clearly have identified that I spend a lot of time making sure my main beds are clean and tidy and growing well. But I think I need to also think more about the sides, the edges, the borders, and how we work with those. They've got to fit in to part of my routine at the same time. Usually my borders are where I grow my perennial crops, hence my raspberries and my gooseberries and my red currants. And we've just got to fit this in some way and make it easy to manage, easy to cope, while being productive at the same time. The key thing of my gardening is, of course, what I call snap gardening. Simple, natural and productive. And that's what we've got to do. Keep it simple, keep it natural, keep it productive. Now, of course, the harvests this week have also been good. We've had more potatoes, as already mentioned, courgettes, tomatoes, chilies, peppers, cabbages, cauliflowers. Good amount of vegetables are just continually coming in. And one of my favourites, the French beans, they are coming in as well. So I'm very, very, very pleased with everything that we are harvesting this week. It just makes this allotment a real pleasure to be bringing home some of the stuff that we enjoy. Now the trouble is, and I've already mentioned to this, and I don't think anybody would be surprised, we are going through this awful drought at the moment. It has been dry for so long, and I don't think it's going to let up any time soon. We've got hosepipe bans going on up and down the country. I'm lucky I don't have a hosepipe ban yet. But at the same time, I don't really use a hosepipe. And on the allotment, it's almost impossible to use a hosepipe. Watering does take a long time. To do it properly, it can take 2 hours to water my entire allotment because we have to use watering cans and we need to give the soil a thorough drenching. Now, when I'm watering, all I do is I take 2 watering cans, I walk up to my water troughs, fill them up and go and empty the water out. This is actually hard work, I'm realising. I've been doing it for years, but while I'm doing it, because it is so hot, I'm just sweating bucket loads and it's not very pleasant at all. I'm looking at ways that we can try and make this better in the future. We're not allowed more than 2 water butts on the allotment, and as I've already said, hose pipes are banned and various other things. I do think the mulch has made a big difference this year, but I've just got to find ways that we can sort of improve our watering to try and make it less hard work. I will come up with something. It's easy at home because it's much easier to do things at home, but on the allotment a little bit harder. Now, one of the other things that I mentioned last week was the fact that I found caterpillars on my brassicas, and that has continued this week, luckily in less numbers, but the ones that I've left behind are much bigger, and I'm continuing just picking them off and taking them home for the chickens. The thing is, I think it's safe to say we are noticing that the numbers of caterpillars are reducing by regular picking, so it definitely makes a difference on keeping them down. I don't think, looking at my broccoli plants, they're going to recover from the damage that they have got. But I think if you are suffering with caterpillars on your brassicas, pick them regularly and that should get on top of them. It makes a big difference. And then we're going to look at other ways of reducing them in the future. I've got a few ideas on my sleeve, but we've got to prove it out in the coming time. For some reason, the seagulls have just suddenly got alive and awake. So I don't know what's going on there, but I think it's now time to head back home, and I'm going to share with you what's going on in the kitchen garden back at home. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in Supporters Club this week. Well, I'm just going to interrupt this podcast and ask, if you are enjoying us, then please leave us a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it really helps the algorithms work for us. It helps people find us who might also be looking for a bit of inspiration on how to grow their own food. Now, added to that, if you are also enjoying this podcast and you want to help support this podcast, keep it running, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. For just £5 a month, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts that give you a bit more of an idea of what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ. And along with that, once a month you will also receive our monthly seed pack. And our seed pack contains a collection of seeds that I have carefully chosen to be sown in that very month, which means these seeds aren't hanging around for months waiting to be sown. You also get a copy of our mini newspaper, and our mini newspaper gives you instructions on how to sow those seeds that I just mentioned. It also acts as a bit of a tool. It gives you the opportunities to take down notes, gives you a list of tasks that you can tick off, and a list of other seeds that you can sow throughout that month as well. And all that is just £5 a month. Now, as an example of what you could expect in the seed pack, over this last week we have sown cabbage, a winter variety called Durham Early. We have also sown some thyme. I like to include a monthly herb. This month it has been thyme. Now, if this sounds like something you would be interested in taking part in, then please head to theveggardenpodcast.co.uk to find out more and sign up. We would absolutely love to have you there. Right, back to the gardening. Well, I'm sat out in the kitchen garden this evening, and it's just cooled down really nicely out here, and it's quite a pleasure. It's a time of evening when it's just nice sitting out in the garden on these summer evenings. There's still a bit of a warmth. You can sit out here quite comfortably, but it's just starting to cool down, and it is lovely. I really like it. The birds are coming out. The place is just coming alive. And best of all, the plants and the food are really showing themselves as well. Now, this week it has been a bit of a tricky week. We've battled again with the heat that seems to be a constant problem at the moment, and the lack of rain. And as such, I do spend a lot of my time in the mornings just coming out, pulling up a few weeds and watering, and also harvesting some vegetables. Things like kale and courgettes and tomatoes and chilies and peppers and aubergines and peas, beans, all the great things that we are harvesting. But I do like to try and have one major job that I like to focus on, and I was struggling to figure out what that was going to be. So me and my wife, we sat down and said, well, what's one job that we probably wouldn't normally do at this time of year, but we could do? Obviously, it's still quite hot, so it does make it working in the garden a little tricky. So the job we came up with was going through my huge collection of plant pots. Now, if you're anything like me, I find that plant pots seem to breed. They seem to gather and collect no matter what we do. I don't know where they come from, I'll be honest. I don't know where they come from. I don't really buy many plant pots in, and I don't really buy any plants in either. Occasional plant, of course, but on a whole, I don't understand how we seem to get more and more plant pots. Now, half the trouble with plant pots isn't so much having a huge collection, it's about how we organise them. So what my wife said we'll do is we'll go through them, which is what we did. We dragged them out from the top of my garden down to the bottom, and we went through one by one, working out what we were going to keep and what we were going to store. Now, when we work out what we're going to keep, it was difficult. I don't like putting anything to waste. To me, it feels very, very wasteful. But broken pots, they can go to the tip. I'm fine with that because they're not serving any use, and I would like to think that when they go to the tip, they are going to be melted down and recycled into something. I could be wrong, but it's just the way I like to think about it. But any pots that I don't need, we took to our garden centre where they have a plant pot recycling point. So I took those to there, put them in that plant pot recycling, and hopefully somebody is going to make good use of them. The plant pots that we kept, we basically went through those and organised those so that the same sizes fit inside all of the plant pots of the same sizes, and that meant we could just store them away a little bit easier. They've all gone inside some of my dustbins, my old dustbins that I've kept aside for keeping plant pots in. Now, eventually my storage of plant pots is going to change. I've got plans afoot that when we're able to get to the point I want to, that are just going to make these storage of these plant pots a little bit easier. Now, I've mostly focused here on plastic plant pots, but I did have quite a large collection of terracotta plant pots or clay plant pots as well. But what we basically did with any of these pots that were broken is I smashed them up into smaller pieces, placed them into one of my bins, and we're going to use those for crocks in the bottom of pots. I may end up with way too many of those in all honesty, but I think that is a good way of just using them up and making sure that they also don't get wasted. Now, what it's made me realise is that we still have a huge collection of plant pots, both plastic and terracotta, and I am trying to move away from using plant pots, particularly here at home. I just think that planting plants in the ground is much better, and it's certainly showing that this year with how dry it's been. Our plants that are in pots are really struggling, so I want to get them in the ground as much as possible. But at the same time, there are certain plants I do want in pots. Potatoes are a great example of plants I think they're just a bit better to grow in pots here in the garden. Down on the allotment they grow in the ground, but here at home I want them growing in pots. I always used to grow my potatoes in pots because they were much easier to harvest from and kind of ensured that we didn't get volunteer potatoes in our garden. But other things would also include some of my herbs, such as thyme and chives particularly. And I'm growing lots of these herbs as companion plants at the moment. We've been sowing some thyme and chives over the weekend, funny enough. But I grow these in pots because I want to be able to move them around. And we've got some thyme particularly growing in the ground, but I'm also having pots of thyme and chives I've just put into the beds in the pots in order to act as these companion plants. And this actually does seem to be working rather nicely. Now, we all know that allium crops such as onions and chives and spring onions and so on, they are known for deterring carrot root fly. So we grow those with our carrots, we get less problems with carrot root fly. And that's certainly a case that I have found just by moving pots of chives in with my carrots. And this is one of the reasons that I do think we do need some pots, because there are things that we can still do with many of our pots, and moving them around just becomes a little bit easier. Now, one of the other things that I have also been doing is growing through some of my pots that have got plants growing in them. These could be my apple trees and things like that. Something I am trying to move away from. But of course, out in the front garden, my driveway, we now don't have any soil areas. It's all a permeable surface, but that means we have to grow everything in pots. The downside, of course, with this heat wave is that we are having to water quite regularly out there. And this often means that I'm going out there in the morning with my watering can and giving each pot an entire watering can of water. It does seem to work. It sounds like a lot of water, and it does actually take quite a while with how many plants I have out there. But it does work. I have noticed that my plants don't seem to be struggling. We don't get much water coming out the bottom, so I think we've got the levels just right, and they're producing fruit. We've got plenty of soft fruit out of these, and our hard fruits are coming along. Added to that, just outside our house on the grass verge, there is a cherry plum tree that's also growing there. Now, this isn't our tree. It's planted by the council. It's the council's property, I guess you could say. But they do allow us to harvest the cherry plums from it, and we've been doing that as well. And they've made these delicious little soft fruits that are really tasty and have gone down really well. We make some fantastic stuff out of it. Just eating them raw is delicious, but we've also turned them into pies and things as well. Cherry plums just growing on the grass verge. I often speak that I think more places should be growing food. Grass verges in particular, it is perfect for growing more food. Right, well, it is now time to head on into the potting shed, where I'll meet you in just a moment. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the kitchen this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef's got with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Well, this week we have been harvesting even more courgettes, and courgettes for me are one of those vegetables that every year we seem to get lots of. And I know I'm not the only person, it is a common theme. Now, One of the things that I do like to do is try and find different ways, different imaginative ways of using up courgettes. And this week I created a baked courgette and tomato gratin. Now this was incredibly simple to cook, but it also was incredibly tasty. So first of all, we preheated the oven to gas mark 6, and then we took a baking dish which we lightly oiled, and we added in sliced onion, sliced garlic, and then layered with slices of courgettes and tomatoes, just getting them to overlap slightly. Each layer we did season with a bit of salt, bit of pepper, bit of oregano, bit of thyme, and drizzled with a nice bit of olive oil as well. We then covered the dish with a bit of foil, just loosely, and baked it in the oven for 20 minutes until the vegetables just began to soften. After the 20 minutes, we removed the foil, scattered over some cheese, some breadcrumbs, and some chopped herbs, and then returned it to the oven for another 15 to 20 minutes until the top was nice and golden and the tomatoes were just bubbling around the edges. We then just let that stand for 5 minutes before service, just so the juices settled. And I tell you what, this was absolutely delicious. It works as a side dish, but it also works as part of a main dish as well. So really tasty way of using up those delicious courgettes if you are thinking of different ways of using them. We do love our courgette recipes, so please do, if you have any, feel free to send them in. Well, recently I have found myself worrying more and more about the lack of rain, particularly this year. And one of the things I've often said is, how are we going to prepare this in the future? We often talk about drought proofing our garden because we believe our gardens are going to get less and less rainfall. The thing is, it's all well and good making plans for what we're going to do in future years and trying to collect rainwater over the winter months. But what are we going to do about the here and now? We haven't had rain for so long. The soil is parched. It's cracked open in places. It is dry. And this is not going to sort itself out any time soon. So what can we do right now? Well, interestingly, I've had an email from Anita this evening, and Anita tells me that she has came up with a system that she has been using grey water in her garden. So what she tells me is that she collects water from her bath, her sinks, that goes straight into a 1,000-litre water tank through some downpipes. Now, this downpipe does have a diverter that they can turn on and off, which I'm really intrigued about and want to find more about this particular type of diverter. However, what she says is that she has found that using grey water in her garden, although not on the veg, just on the grass areas and the ornamentals, has done the world of good, and they are surprised just how much water they are saving by doing this. And this is actually something I have been doing myself, except I've been using grey water to flush our toilet, but also to water areas of our garden that don't need rainwater, i.e. our ornamentals or our lawn. It is just surprising how much grey water we can use and how much rainwater we're saving by using this grey water. So I really want to get this across, that if you are struggling with having enough water, then please think about using your grey water to water the garden. But one of the things I do want to warn, if you are looking at storing grey water, only store it for a couple of days because it can smell rather rapidly and it smells awful. Trust me, we found that out the hard way. It tends to go anaerobic and it smells awful. So we don't keep grey water for any longer than we really need to. Within 24 to 48 hours, it needs to all be used up. But it is surprising just how much water would be going down the drain that we are saving. Now, Anita also tells me, and this is something I wanted to bring up if you are looking at doing this, that some water companies actually supply a meter that reduce your water bill by recycling this grey water. So for me, that is something I found interesting and looking into, because if I can save money off my water bills, then I am a very happy person. And that goes again, more money we can save on our water bills, the more money we can use in our garden. That's kind of the aim, the point of what we're trying to do. Now, added to that, I've also had a comment come in from Lynn over on Spotify. And Lynn says, "Hi Richard, I use a dehydrator for drying raspberry leaves, chopped rhubarb, mint, etc. for herbal teas, but I must give fruit leather a go. Never thought of that. Thanks, Lynn. P.S. How are the bees doing? Any honey yet?" So first of all, use of a dehydrator. Dehydrators are pretty cheap these days. You can even make a solar one in this heat that we've got at the moment, but an electric dehydrator are pretty cheap. And if you are growing your own food, and then they are, in my opinion, something that really goes a long way in helping you preserve your food and make it last a little bit longer. I make fruit leathers, I dry herbs, I do a whole wide range of things with our dehydrator. But Lynn asks about the bees, and I thought it might be a good chance to give you guys a bit of a bee update with what's going on with the bees. I haven't mentioned them for a few weeks, but what I can say is that we are inspecting them, or rather I am inspecting them every Sunday morning. It's really nice actually. I go out for a journey every Sunday morning, go to my bees, and I give them a once over, and it's been interesting to say the least. So a few weeks ago, I had to add a super, which is a second box on top of the brood frame, because the brood was multiplying so fast and that I felt they were going to need more space. What's been happening since is that the brood, the main box that the bees live in, the bees have been producing honey in there. They're still producing brood, but since going over the longest day of the year, they've switched to producing honey, which is what we want, because they want to produce the honey to get them through the winters. Now, every inspection I make, I always try and spot the queen, and most inspections that has been successful, but I did go for a couple of weeks where I didn't see any, and I was getting a little bit worried, but thankfully I then spotted the queen, so all was good. Now, with regards to the supers, the bees took a little time to really start going up into the supers and start using them. In the last couple of weeks, I have noticed that they're starting to draw comb, which has mean they're starting to make their honeycomb basically. And they're starting, this week I noticed, they're starting to fill that up with honey. Now there is a bit of a process because they have to fill up all the honeycomb with the wax, with the honey. They have to dry it out and then they have to cap it off, which is what's going on down in the brood. But with what's going on up in the supers at the moment, I personally am of the opinion that I don't think we're going to get honey this year. I don't mind that. The most important thing is trying to get the bees through the winter, and that's why they make honey. They get a reserve ready for the winter. So whilst we still got time, I personally am not of the opinion that we're not going to get honey this year, but there's always next year. However, it is fascinating watching all these bees work and how they are producing honey. It is really fascinating, and the little the way the society works within a colony, it is fascinating. Obviously, one of the big things is the equipment. How is it holding up? And I've got to say, the equipment I've got from Buzzing to Beekeeping is doing a fantastic job. As long as I use the equipment right, I did have a little trouble keeping the smoker going, but I've learned how to do that now. Then I haven't had any problems. Yesterday, however, when I was tending to my bees, it rained and I had to stop the bee inspection halfway through. But I was a little bit silly with this because it rained. I covered the bees back over. I took my gloves off. I pulled out my phone to see how long the rain was going to last. And then I went to pop my glove back on and there was 2 bees in there which stung me. And my arm has been rather itchy today and swollen up quite nastily. So that has been a learning curve for me, is that if it rains, we've just got to pack up and leave it. Don't bother pulling out the phone. Make sure there's no bees. Just don't get stung. But also making sure I have things like antihistamine. I have this after bite stuff, but I also need things like antihistamine in my kit, just so I can make sure when this happens in the future, I have everything covered. So it's still really fun keeping these bees. I'm still learning a lot from it, but I would like to get some honey. I just don't think it's going to happen this year. Maybe next year. Well, if you have got anything that you want to comment, then please do as Lynn has done. Leave a comment on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it really means the world to us, and it helps us get found by more people as well. Of course, if you want to get in touch by email, my email address is richard@veggrowpodcast.co.uk, just like Anita emailed me. Along with that, you can also visit the website, veggrowpodcast.co.uk, where you can leave a comment and you can also leave a voicemail. And again, we love having the comments, we love having the voicemails, love to hear from you in any form that you may want to send me a message. And of course, you can find me on social media as well. And if you're finding me on social, then please give us a follow and a like as well. Well, that is it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. We will be back again next time. So until then, please take care.